We live in interesting times for the headlines. New Zealand police announced an investigation into how an eruption at the White Island volcano led to an estimated 13 deaths. Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi faced calls for Myanmar to stop the genocide of Rohingya Muslims as she personally led her country's defense at the UN Stop Court. A gunman killed himself after shooting dead 6 patients at a hospital in the eastern Czech city of Ostrava in what the premier has called an immense tragedy. And toxic haze blanketed Sydney, triggering a chorus of smoke alarms to ring across the city and forcing school children inside as severe weather conditions fueled deadly bush blazes along Australia's east coast. Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world, thank you very much for joining us. And now to the news. New Zealand police on Tuesday announced an investigation into how an eruption at the White Island volcano led to more than 13 deaths. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern met with first responders at a fire station in Wakatane, where she hugs them and thanks them for their service. The threat level at the volcano was raised in the week before Monday's disaster, prompting questions about whether tour groups should have been allowed to visit the popular destination of the North Island coast. Now, police said in a statement that they commenced an investigation into the circumstances of the deaths and injuries at the volcano. However, they backed away from an earlier announcement that the probe was a criminal investigation, saying instead it was being carried out on behalf of the coroner. No reason for the reversal was immediately provided.
47 people went on to the island yesterday. We can now confirm that 5 are deceased, 31 are currently in hospital, a further 8 are still missing, and 3 have been discharged from hospital overnight. Today our focus will be on working with the experts to determine the safety for us to return to the island to look to recover those people that are currently missing.
Yesterday at 2:11 p.m, Whakaari White Island erupted. There were 2 explosions, one after the other in quick succession. At this stage, we can confirm that amongst those currently listed as missing or injured are New Zealanders who were part of the tour operation and tourists from Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, China and Malaysia. That is to the best of our knowledge.
Meanwhile, steam continues to burn in the active volcano. More than 24 hours after New Zealand's White Island volcano erupted, families around the world are still waiting for answers about their loved ones, where the island deemed too dangerous to search. Among those missing is New Zealander Tipen Mangi, a tour guide in his early 20s, whose family were holding out hope that he was still alive.
We were a bit shocked. We were shocked because up until then we didn't know what was really happening on the island, and we're still hopeful that he's still alive there somewhere. I don't know how you can, he's a wonderful boy, he's an awesome kid, Tipen. Everyone knows him, he's well known on the coast from the small babies. Right?
Yes. And we are emotional. And some of us don't want to fall apart, but it's not really an option. I mean, we've got to stay strong.
Intensive care paramedic Russell Clark was among those dispatched by helicopter to the volcano, which sits semi-submerged 50 kilometers out to the sea. He said he was confronted by an overwhelmingly and shockingly scene of devastation.
when we got there, it was quite an experience. It was like I've seen the Chernobyl miniseries, and there was just everything was just blanketed in ash. It was quite an overwhelming feeling. Yeah, there was a helicopter on the island that had obviously been there at the time, with its rotor blades were off it. It's quite a shocking experience, I suppose, but we have to try and put that to the side for now and get on with what we're doing. And it's pretty overwhelming. I mean, the amount of dust, and it really hits home that you can. I can only imagine what it was like for the people that were there at the time. They had nowhere to go, and an absolutely terrible experience for them.
After detecting heightened activity at the island, New Zealand authorities on November 18 raised the volcanic alert level for White Island from level 1 to level 2, the highest level before an explosion. Now, because of the type of volcano and the lack of significant lava flows, many of the regular warning systems that work on other larger volcanoes may not have been triggered, according to authorities. Meanwhile, scientists estimate there is a 50% chance of a smaller or similar-sized eruption over the next 24 hours.
Web cameras indicate gas and steam jetting from the active vent area. While we've seen a steady decline in the seismic activity, there remains significant uncertainty about any future activity. GNS estimate that there is a 50% chance of a smaller or similar-sized eruption over the next 24 hours, and that means a 50% chance of no eruption. It is estimated that a large eruption is unlikely at this time. If there is an eruption, there is an extremely low likelihood of ash reaching the mainland. It is possible gas may be smelt depending on the wind direction.
In other news, toxic haze blanketed Sydney, triggering a chorus of smoke alarms to ring across the city as severe weather conditions fueled deadly bush blazes. Emergency services responded to an unprecedented 500 automatic call-outs inside a few hours, according to New South Wales Fire and Rescue's Roger Mentha. Let's listen in.
Look, we're expecting this operation to go for quite some time. Even with milder conditions, there's going to be a lot of fire in the area, and there's so much active fire edge that it's going to take not just days, weeks, but weeks and weeks potentially for good quality containment. We're going to have to really wait until some quality rain gets here before we can call these fires properly contained. Look, I have seen this particular fire run play out. This is the third time now. And so have many of the local communities. They're used to fires, but what we are seeing is that a lot of seasoned firefighters are actually saying, look, it's just a bit different. It's running harder, it's running faster, and it's just far more intense.
Regional Fire Headquarters, miles from the nearest blazes, was itself evacuated while throngs of mask-wearing commuters choked their way through thick, acrid air, and the organizers of a harbor yacht race declared it was unsafe to proceed. Online, Sydney residents reported breathing problems and said they were choking on the smoke. The city has endured air quality surpassing hazardous levels for weeks as about 100 blazes continue to rage throughout New South Wales. Tuesday had been expected to bring strong winds and high temperatures that made for severe conditions where embers can be blown ahead of the fire into suburbs and threaten properties. And as the day developed, there were nearly 100 bushfires incidents in the state of New South Wales alone and dozens more in Queensland. Total fire bans were put in place across much of the east of the country and in large parts of Western Australia. Temperatures in some inland areas eased past 44 degrees Celsius or 111 degrees Fahrenheit. In other news, a gunman killed himself after shooting dead 6 patients at a hospital in the eastern Czech city of Ostrava in what the premier has called an immense tragedy. Take a look. This is the attacker, and he gunned down people at close range at the trauma ward of the faculty hospital in Ostrava, a steel hub located some 300 kilometers east of Prague. 4 men and 2 women died during the assault, which lasted only a few seconds, according to police. 2 other people were seriously wounded, while a third person sustained light injuries. Police said they had not yet determined what drove the 42-year-old to launch the attack. I was told the dead victims were people sitting in the waiting room of the trauma ward. Fortunately, there were not as many as usual, Prime Minister Andrej Babis told local media. He said the gunman was allegedly shooting from a close range, aiming at the head and the neck. The shooter then fled the scene in a silver Renault Laguna car, sparking a dramatic police hunt with hundreds of officers and 2 helicopters chasing him. The man turned the gun on himself inside the vehicle as police were about to capture him in a village just northwest of Ostrava, according to Regional Police Chief Thomas Kuzel. Interior Minister Jan Hamacek said the man died despite resuscitation efforts. Now, police said the gunman had used a short firearm in the attack, which took place shortly after 0600 GMT. The public Czech radio identified the killer as a builder from the nearby Opava district. His boss, named as Ales Zegula, told the radio station that the attacker had decided he was seriously ill and that no one wanted to treat him. Now, prior to his death, police had urged maximum possible caution as they tweeted pictures of the man who had thick black hair and was wearing a red and black jacket. In other news, a Chilean military plane with 38 people aboard has gone missing after taking off from the country's south for a base in Antarctica and is presumed to have crashed, according to authorities. 17 of those on board the C-130 aircraft were crew and the others were passengers, according to Chile's Air Force. Now, the plane is considered to have crashed, and all national and international air and maritime means available in the area are continuing the search for survivors in the sector where communications were lost with the aircraft, it added in a statement. Now, the 4-engine aircraft took off Monday at 4:55 p.m. local time from an airbase in Punta Arenas in Chile's far south, and contact was lost at 6:13 p.m., a little over an hour after it took off. Now, the plane went missing in Drake Passage. It's a key maritime route between South America and Antarctica, frequently hit by some of the world's worst weather. However, conditions were fine for flying on Monday, according to Chile's Air Force. President Sebastián Piñera, whose country has been witnessing its worst civil unrest in decades, said in a tweet he would fly to the southern city of Punta Arenas with Interior Minister Gonzalo Blumel. Now, from squalid refugee camps in Bangladesh, Rohingya who fled a brutal Myanmar military crackdown are calling on Aung San Suu Kyi to acknowledge these mass atrocities as she defends her countries against genocide charges at the UN's top court. Take a look.
Good morning, Ms. Suu Kyi. Are you defending the indefensible?
Correct.
Any comment, Ms. Suu Kyi?
The Nobel Peace Laureate arrived Tuesday at the International Court of Justice in The Hague to lead the defense against claims brought by Gambia that Myanmar's military tried to systematically wipe out the Muslim minority in 2017. The violence sparked a mass exodus of some 740,000 Rohingya to refugee settlements in Bangladesh border towns where survivors are still haunted by the rape and murder of loved ones by soldiers and vigilante mobs. Now, UN investigators have concluded that the 2017 violence amounted to genocide, with Doctors Without Borders estimating that at least 6,700 Rohingyas were killed in the first month of the crackdown alone. The case, brought by the tiny West African nation of Gambia, is the first international legal attempt to bring Myanmar to justice over the crisis. Myanmar's military has insisted its crackdown was needed to root out Rohingya militants who attacked border police posts in 2017. Meanwhile, the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh say they want justice as the Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi defends Myanmar in The Hague against accusations of genocide at the ICC, or International Court of Justice. Let's listen in.
We believe that there are no safety in the Arkan state without accountability. It is the first step of the accountability, so that we are very happy for that. But we are worrying one thing, the international community, if they follow the Myanmar Aung San Suu Kyi's activity, because of Aung San Suu Kyi influenced the whole about the world. He is the one Nobel Prize owners. So if the international community listen their hard voice, it be harmful for the Rohingya people.
Suu Kyi was once mentioned in the same breath as Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi, but her international reputation has been tarnished by her silence over the plight of Rohingya and her defense of the same generals who once kept her under house arrest. The case will also be watched in Bangladesh, where around 740,000 Rohingya were forced to flee into sprawling camps by the bloody campaign in Myanmar's northwestern Rakhine state. Addressing the annual high-level pledging event for the Central Emergency Response Fund, Emergency Relief Coordinator Mark Lowcock said the outlook for the year ahead is bleak, as 1 person in 45 around the world are expected to need humanitarian aid in 2020. Take a look.
We know that we will face significant challenges in 2020. I fear the outlook for the year ahead is bleak. Last week, we launched the Global Humanitarian Overview. It sets out the global needs and humanitarian response plans for UN agencies and our partners. Next year, the UN and partner organizations aim to assist nearly 109 million people, the most vulnerable people on the planet. 1 person in 45 around the world are expected to need our help, the highest number ever. That will require funding of nearly $29 billion.
Today, surf is contending with a far greater scale of suffering than in its creation in 2005. Endless conflicts, mass displacement, and extreme weather events, amplified by the climate crisis, are increasing the number of people in need and making humanitarian action more difficult and complex than ever. The Global Humanitarian Overview, our most comprehensive forecasting tool, announced last week that a record 168 million people are expected to need life-saving humanitarian aid in 2020. I urge you to look at the figures and put your resources where they will have the most impact. We pledge continuously to make the surf faster, more efficient, more innovative, and more responsive. Please stand by our General Assembly commitment to raise $1 billion for surf.
As she said on the video, the most important piece.
At 34, Sanna Marin will become the world's youngest sitting prime minister when she's sworn in by the Finnish parliament. But she's far from lacking in political experience. The former transport minister gained a reputation as a tough, straight-talking operator from her 5 years as leader of the city council in her hometown of Tampere, where she took office in 2012, aged 27. Marin's rise to the pinnacle of Finnish government means that when she takes over as head of the Social Democratic Party next year, women will hold the top job in each of the 5 parties in Finland's governing center-left coalition. And all but one of the leaders are aged under 35. Marin becomes not only Finland's youngest ever prime minister, but also the world's youngest sitting head of government, ahead of Ukraine's prime minister Oleksiy Honcharuk, who is currently 35. As mother of a 2-year-old daughter, Marin said Sunday that childcare will not interfere with her ability to be prime minister.
No, aivan ensimmäiseksi tietenkin.
And Democrats have laid out the case for the impeachment of President Donald Trump as they prepare to issue formal charges against the U.S. leader. 4 months after an anonymous whistleblower sparked the investigation of President Trump for seeking illicit political favors from Ukraine, Democrats say there is clear evidence that he has committed bribery, abused his power, and obstructed the investigation.
President Trump put himself before country. The president's supporters are going to argue that this whole process is unfair. The record before us is clear on this point as well. We invited the president to participate in this hearing, to question witnesses, and to present evidence that might explain the charges against him. President Trump chose not to show.
It is a requirement that the president be a person who does not abuse his power. It is a requirement that the president be a person who does not risk national security of this nation and the integrity of our elections in order to further his own re-election prospect.
This unfair process reflects the degree to which Democrats are obsessed with impeaching the president. The Democrats went searching for a set of facts on which to impeach the president: the emoluments clause, the president's business and financial records, the Mueller report, allegations of obstruction, before landing on the Ukraine phone call. The impeachment inquiry is clearly an orchestrated effort to upend our political system.
Democrats are expected to announce on Tuesday 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump, according to U.S. media, after laying out their case at the hearing against a president they branded a clear and present danger to national security. The articles will focus on abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The Washington Post reported on Monday, citing 3 officials familiar with the matter. It also added that the full House of Representatives will vote on the articles next week ahead of a trial in the Senate. CNN, meanwhile, said a 3rd article on obstruction of justice was still being debated, and the network sources cautioned that plans were still being finalized. A devastating measles outbreak has continued to spread in Samoa, with the death toll reaching 70, as the United Nations on Monday released $2.6 million in emergency aid to combat the epidemic. Official figures showed there were 112 new cases in the 24 hours to Monday morning, despite a massive immunization drive last week that saw the entire Pacific nation shut down for 2 days. In New York, the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Mark Lowcock announced the aid had been released. The United Nations said the funds will go towards vaccinations, obstetric and neonatal care for infected mothers and newborns, clean water, and public health information campaigns. Samoa's government said the mobile vaccination teams had succeeded in ensuring 90% of the 200,000 strong population was immunized, up from around 30% when the epidemic began in mid-October. However, the vaccine takes 10 to 14 days to take effect, meaning it's too early to say whether the outbreak has peaked. Among the 70 dead, 61 are children aged 4 or under. Eagle News will be right back.
Tungkulin na MTRCV ang mag-provide na appropriate
Welcome back. Nissan should be fined $22 million for filing documents that underreported the compensation of former Chief Carlos Ghosn, according to Japanese regulators. And they recommended this on Tuesday, with troubled with the troubled firm, saying it would not dispute the penalty. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission made the recommendation as Gon, who was arrested in November last year, awaits trial in Tokyo on 4 charges of financial conduct or misconduct. Among the allegations against him are claims that he underreported his compensation from 2010 to 2018, deferring some of his pay and failing to declare it to shareholders. Gon denies all the charges against him and has argued there was no final agreement on any deferred payments. In a statement, Nissan said it took the recommendation extremely serious and would consider its response after receiving a formal notice from the Financial Services Agency. Nissan also faces charges over the alleged underreporting of Gon's income. In other news, the World Trade Organization announced the launch of intensive political negotiations to salvage the appellate branch of the body's internal court, which is set to collapse under U.S. opposition. The WTO appeals panel, sometimes dubbed the Supreme Court of World Trade, will no longer have the needed quorum of 3 judges as of midnight on Tuesday due to mandatory retirements. Now, the United States has blocked the appointment of new judges, accusing the court of serious overreach and breaching U.S. interests.
The effort of David Walker to try and find a solution to address the U.S. problems resulted in a draft General Council decision, which was put to the membership this morning with a goal of obtaining consensus. Unfortunately, that consensus was not achieved. It was a not unexpected but clearly unfortunate development.
WTO Director General Roberto Azevedo acknowledged in a statement that there would be no solution to the deadlock before the Tuesday deadline, but he said he would launch more intensive high-level consultations on how to resolve the long-standing impasse. The appellate body's demise will place international trade disputes in legal limbo. Countries will still be able to file grievances and dispute panels can issue rulings. But nations unhappy with those rulings can simply delay enforcement by filing an appeal to a non-functioning court. The European Union, Canada, and Norway have mutually agreed to an ad hoc process to hear trade disputes that may arise amongst each other while the WTO panel is shut down. But as WTO spokesman Keith Rockwell told reporters, it is not clear when a solution can be found.
Well, it's a serious crisis, but the WTO is an organization that has been through many crises in its relatively short history. Just 20 years ago, we had the Seattle Ministerial Conference, and the way that ended led many people to predict the demise of the WTO way back in 1999. But as was the case then, and I believe it's the case now, the reports of our demise are greatly exaggerated, to paraphrase. Hopefully, through some intensive consultations, a little bit more political, a little bit more of a political injection into this process, we can find some kind of a solution.
And traffic is heavy on the Paris Ring Road as France faces a 6th day of strike against the pension reform, which paralyzes public transport and causes hundreds of kilometers of traffic jams in the Paris region. Take a look. Now, the unions want President Emmanuel Macron to abandon his plan for a single pension scheme that would scrap dozens of individual ones enjoyed by train drivers, sailors, lawyers, and other professions. Now, critics say it will force millions to work later in life to get the same benefits, but President Macron has promised not to touch the official retirement age of 62. Most Paris metro lines were shut completely on Monday, leading to huge traffic jams like this. Similar disruption is expected on Tuesday Paris time. Now, just 1 in 5 high-speed TGV trains were running, and Air France has cut 25% of domestic flights scheduled for Tuesday and 10% of its shorter international flights. Some Paris museums were again forced to partially close, and both opera houses canceled some performances. And South Africa's debt-laden state power company Eskom announced it was implementing a more intense electricity rationing schedule. 5 days after continued rolling power cuts have plunged businesses, schools, and homes into darkness. The embattled state-owned utility Eskom, which generates around 95% of the country's electricity, has long struggled to produce power due to aging infrastructure at its coal-fired power stations and decades of mismanagement. One of the biggest risks to the economy, according to pundits, has been posed by the embattled state power company, which has a 450 billion rand or $30 billion in debt despite multiple bailouts from the state. Government plans to pour 128 billion rand or $8.8 billion into Eskom over a 3-year period that began in February 2019. In other news, the Philippine Overseas Labor Office conducts a consultation with Filipino migrant workers in New Zealand. We have an update from Greg Besa.
In New Zealand, there are thousands of overseas Filipino workers who are being employed at various sectors and industries across the country. Upon recognition of the crucial role of Polo in addressing the issues and concerns affecting the Filipino migrant workers, the Philippine Embassy in New Zealand, along with the Filipino community leaders and the workers themselves, had been longing to be having a Polo in this country.
No other than the Philippine Secretary of Labor and Employment, Honorable Sylvester Bello III, graced the launching of Polo New Zealand on 17th November of this year, which was held at the Philippine Embassy in Wellington. This historic occasion was witnessed by other Department of Labor and Employment officials, the embassy officials and staff, and the Filipino community leaders.
Kaya po kami nandito ngayon ay para maipatayo o itatag yung ating Philippine Overseas Labor Office dito sa lungsod ng Wellington, bansang New Zealand. Ito po ay nagpapatunay kung gaano kamahal ang ating Pangulo, ang ating mga overseas workers dahil sa inyo po ay napakalaki ang utang ng ating bansa sa inyo. Hindi dahil sa inyong paghihirap, pagsusumikap, ay nakatulong kayo sa ekonomiya ng ating bansa.
On his speech, Secretary Bello emphasized that the establishment of Polo in New Zealand is a gift from the Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte to the Filipino migrant workers in the country, whom he has valued and loved so much, just like the other overseas Filipino workers across the globe, due to their significant contribution to the Philippine economy. He also expressed his gratitude to the Philippine Embassy in New Zealand, particularly to Ambassador Jesus Domingo, for all the assistance extended in making the establishment of Polo a reality. The Administrator of Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, Honorable Bernard Olalia, who was also present during the launching, expressed his confidence that the well-being of the Filipino migrant workers in New Zealand would now be best served under the Polo supervision.
Marami po tayong mga kababayang naririto at dahil po rito, bibigyan po natin ng tuon lahat po ng mga pangangailangan at lahat po ng kanilang mga problema patungo po at about the overseas employment.
On the other hand, Philippine Ambassador Jesus Domingo was pleased with the start of Polo in New Zealand as he warmly welcomed Labor Attaché Angel Borja Jr., who in return encouraged the migrant workers to avail of the services that Polo could offer to them.
We are very proud to announce the launching of the Philippine Overseas Labor Office for New Zealand and Pacific, to be headed by Labor Attaché Angel Borja.
Our Filipino workers who are here in New Zealand may come to our office anytime that they have any labor and employment-related matters that we would like the Labor Office to provide them with assistance.
Right after the ceremony, Secretary Bello and PUA Administrator Olalia held a dialogue with the Filipino community leaders wherein problems, issues, and concerns affecting the Filipino migrant workers were discussed. Both officials were thankful to the support of the Filipino community leaders as they encouraged them to work with Polo in promoting the well-being of the workers. Some Filipino community leaders and migrant workers themselves were excited as they conveyed their gratitude to the Philippine government in establishing Polo in New Zealand.
I think it is quite good that we have the Polo here in New Zealand because it will actually help overseas workers that we have in the Philippines, and also we have that capacity to be able to guide all the people that are coming to New Zealand, and also to be able to help those who are already in here.
Secretary Bello and President Rodrigo Duterte, thank you very much for granting our request for having a Polo office here in New Zealand.
Maraming salamat po sa aming Pangulong Duterte sa pagkakaroon po ng Polo dito sa New Zealand. Malaking bagay po sa aming mga OFW na manggagawa po dito sa New Zealand. Lalo-lalo na po sa yung nag-a-apply ng change employer, hindi na po kinakailangan mag-submit sa Australia.
Polo is mainly based in New Zealand. It also has jurisdiction over the Filipino migrant workers in the independent state of Samoa, the Cook Islands, Tonga, and Fiji. Yet, despite the workers' territorial locations, Polo must reach them out and carry out its mandate at all cost. From Philippine Embassy in Wellington, New Zealand, this is Greg Besa. I am and will always be one with 25.
Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
We are inviting you all to the EBC Forum on Explaining Blockchain and Cryptocurrency. Learn about the current trends and developments on these new technologies and digital assets and discover a whole new world. That's going to be on December 11, 2019 at the Studio 1 of EBC Building here at number 25 Central Avenue, New Era, Quezon City. For more information about the forum, go to the EBC and Eagle News fan pages. Admission is free, but you have to register online.
Speaking ahead of an unprecedented meeting of more than 50 finance ministers at the United Nations climate talks in Madrid, the new director of the World Bank, Axel van Trotsenberg, calls on countries who had committed to help finance the fight against global warming to make good on their pledges. Take a look.
Finance ministers are important because they go over the budget. They are involved in incentives setting through tax incentives, etc. And so if we want to scale up climate financing, finance ministries are important. So I think it's a very good development that they are now joining. It is about how they develop a network to be a complementary force to the COP process, so that indeed also ultimately greening of budgets is occurring around the world. Well, my message is action. I think that there has been a lot of talk. I think what governments or organizations have promised, they should act upon. In the case of the World Bank, in this decade that ends now in 2019, the World Bank Group provided $120 billion in climate-related investment, and our ambition that we expressed during our capital increase discussion is that we will deliver $335 billion of climate co-benefits through our investment support to these countries until 2030.
First, let's head on to Canada. The 2019 Subway Bowl officially closed out the BC high school football season. Here's our EBC correspondents Anthony Sevilla and Zolty Horvath.
The 2019 Subway Bowl, or the BC High School Football Championships, officially came to a close at BC Place in Vancouver, which featured some of the best high school football players from all over the province of British Columbia. I'm Anthony Sevilla, here with fellow Eagle News correspondent Zolty Horvath. Plenty of exciting football throughout the entire day, which started at the junior level. Windsor defeated Bolinas 25-14, and Mount Douglas finished undefeated for the season after defeating Lord Tweedsmuir 41-14. So Zolty, out of the two junior varsity games, who stood out to you the most?
Definitely has to be Windsor quarterback Alex Garagoshin. Had 2 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. Definitely was unstoppable today, came ready to play in this championship game.
We spoke with Duke's quarterback after the game, and this is what he had to say.
It feels great. It feels really good. Just because of last year, when this is just redemption year. We played all year. We played hard all year, practiced hard all year. Our team executed, and we won the game here. We had our ups and downs. Practices were hard, games were hard, some close games, and at the end of the game, we pushed through and won it. It just feels great that everything's over and that we've played this hard and got what we deserve.
Moving on to the varsity level, the Vernon Panthers defeated the Langley Saints 41-14. Who was the X factor for Vernon in this game?
Definitely had to be Zach Smith. 6 total touchdowns, 3 passing, 3 rushing. Absolutely unstoppable. Looked like a young Lamar Jackson in this game today. And even after the game, right when we were about to interview him, a college scout came up, gave him his business card, told him to come see him after our interview. Pretty cool experience.
Oh, it feels great to end on a win. Our last high school game ever to win 3 years in a row now, so it felt great to do with the grade 12s. This game right now, the feeling, you know, when last couple seconds when the time's taken down, just celebrating with my guys.
I think Zach took what they were given. So early on, I wanted to take a shot over top because we weren't aggressive enough early on last week, and so I wanted to take a shot. Caden made a great catch, and I think that set the tone. After that, they were worried about us going deep, and then we started picking apart the curls and the hooks and the flats and all those things that kept them unbalanced.
In the AAA varsity game, the Vancouver College Fighting Irish crushed Lord Tweedsmuir 45-0 in a rematch of the 2017 AAA JV Finals. What could Tweedsmuir have done differently in this game?
You know, I talked to one of the Tweedsmuir coaches after the game. They told me their entire game plan was to stop number 2 Deshaun Johnson. That guy was the MVP of the entire season, had 1,500 yards rushing, 25 touchdowns on the season. They definitely stopped him, but they forgot about everyone else on the Vancouver College team. Jason Soriano scored 5 total touchdowns, which is a new BC high school championship record. He had 3 receiving touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and a pick 6 to earn game MVP.
You know what? It's just that mentality. You know, it's your last game of your high school career. You know, you want to end it off strong, and I think we all did that today, not just me. So I'm really proud of everyone. We remember what they did to us 2 years ago. We remember the score. We remember how many guys we were missing, how many guys we had injured, and we knew that we were just a completely different team, and that we were just ready to just take it to them. And we know at the varsity level, that's where it counts. In JV, it doesn't really matter. But at the varsity level, we knew we had to win this game right here. We had to make a statement to them, and I'm really proud of us.
So Zolty, what's the biggest takeaway from the entire Subway Bowl?
Definitely has to be the talent at the high school level in this province. You know, in the past we've sent Chase Claypool to Notre Dame, which is an NCAA school. But other than that, there's no big notable names that have gone to the U.S. to play football. A lot of the local talent, they stick around. But let me tell you, there were so many scouts in this building tonight. You're definitely going to be seeing some of these guys down south in the NCAA, or at least playing U Sports on the East Coast in Ontario.
That officially ends the 2019 BC High School football season. From BC Place Stadium in Vancouver, this is Zolty Horvath, and I'm Anthony Sevilla, and we're always one with 25.
The Philippine Jiu-Jitsu team, Adrian Guggenheim and Annie Ramirez, snared the gold in their respective weight classes at the Lost Group Event Center. Guggenheim struck gold in the men's 77-kilogram final, defeating Indonesia's Willie via armbar with 1 minute and 17 seconds. Singapore's Yan Wei Kwan and Thailand's Ratchata Namyu settled for third in that category. Meanwhile, Ramirez hacked out a hard-earned 3-0 win against Malaysia's Poyong Cassandra J to take first-place honors in the 55-kilogram division. Owanong Sang Sri Chok from Thailand and Singapore's Fiona To bagged the bronzes. Meanwhile, Peter Maimban clinched a bronze when he surrendered a 14-0 loss to Indonesia's Muhammad Noor in their 120-kilogram semifinals clash. Our EBC correspondent Ben Bernaldez was able to talk to Paul Maimban. Let's listen in.
Alright, Paul, congratulations for winning. We saw what you did.
Gusto ko sana gold para sa ating lahat. Well, bawi na lang next time.
Alam ko, gano'n katagal nag-training dito?
Kaya mabigat yung pagkatalo kasi ang haba ng paghahanda namin.
Pumunta ka pa ng Japan ba?
Then nag-compete din kami sa Thailand, sa Korea para ma-ready lang for this.
Gano'n ka katagal na nag-jiu-jitsu? You've been weightlifting, other sports. Ito yung bago mong sport eh.
Kaya halos sabay-sabay, but for the last year, nag-focus talaga ako rito kasi for SEA Games. Then, so sana mas maraming mag-jiu-jitsu. Tingnan nyo, 32 na ako. Pwede pa. But yun nga, yung mga next generation, yung future generation, sana habang maaga pa, pati mga parents, alam mo yun, encourage nila mag-anak nila sports, hindi lang basketball. Daming ibang sports na pwede.
Was this your dream? To play for the flag?
Honestly, gusto ko na talaga enjoy, but dahil kasunod-sunod na eh. I mean,
nakita ka na yung potential ni Coach Ali.
Yes, pero yun nga eh, I know mas marami pang mas magaling out there na mas kaya nilang dalhin yung bansa. So, baka hindi pa sila nag-jiu-jitsu, alam mo yun. So, yun nga. So, bisitahin nyo yung local nyo.
Thanks, Ben. Meanwhile, Filipina and world champ Meggy Ochoa won the country's second gold in the SEA Games 2019 Jiu-Jitsu. She defeated Vietnam's Dao Ly Thu Trang in the women's 45-kilogram event, 13-0. Let's listen in.
Congratulations, Meg. Spectacular performance. What was your game plan? Alam ko hindi mo na minamaliit naman yung lahat ng competitors mo, no? But what was going on your mind going to the competition?
Grabe, sobrang excited ko going into the competition. Kung nakita nyo lang ako nung naghahanda ako para sa laban, like just today, parang hindi na ako mapakali. Sobrang gusto ko nang ilabas kung ano yung pinaghahandaan namin this entire year. And nandito pa tayo sa Pilipinas. Alam mo yun, parang mahal na mahal ko yung bansa, mahal na mahal ko yung Diyos. And para sa akin, lahat ng ginawa ko dyan sa Max, lahat ng nilabas ko dun sa laban, para yun sa lahat ng mga tao na sumuporta sa journey na to. Number one, of course, para sa Diyos kasi kung wala siya, wala lahat ng ito. And of course, para sa buong Pilipinas kasi gusto ko talaga ipakita na tayong mga Pilipino, kayang-kaya natin to. Kaya yun, sobrang excited na talaga.
Alright, Topper, lahat na lang.
Meanwhile, Team Philippines, or the Philippine Volcanoes, won the 30th Southeast Asian Games Men's Rugby Sevens gold medal with a 19-0 victory over Malaysia at the Clark Parade Ground. This is the second time that the Volcanoes defeated the Malaysians in the finals after scoring a 24-7 triumph in 2015 in Singapore SEA Games before finishing fourth in the 2017 edition held in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It was Robert Luceno who got the Philippines off to a strong start with an early try en route to victory. Here's Mr. Luceno.
Obviously, just reflecting from that game, myself and the boys were obviously chuffed. We were over the moon that we'd won gold, but we knew it was going to be a tough task. We didn't come into this tournament knowing for sure that we'd get gold. That was our target, but we respect the teams that were in this tournament. All the teams, obviously, the stronger teams that we faced were Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. And, Malaysia were putting on exactly the same amount of points on the other teams that we were. So we knew that they were a dangerous side in attack. So we spoke about our defence, and I think it was evident there that we put up 2 performances and we managed to keep them scoreless. So I'm really pleased with that.
And that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here at Eagle News, I'm Alma Angeles. Always one with 25. Good night.